Perfect time to reflect on all of our Black heroes. I wanted to talk about a personal hero of mine, Florence Griffith Joyner. She's a huge inspiration to me and was my sports idol growing up. She's the fastest woman of all time. She still holds the world record she set in the 1988 Olympics for both the 100-meter and 200-meter. Not only was she a dominant athlete, she was a fashion icon and designer. She embodied strength, passion, and style in a fearless and unapologetic way. Her power, beauty, and strength inspired me as a Black woman and an athlete. She was the fastest, the boldest, and is still the very best in history.
One 1-800-FLOWERS this Valentine's Day. Wow. With 18 stem enchanted rose medley, $39.99, double the roses, $20 more. 1-800-FLOWERS.com. Click the radio icon and enter the code HERD. So it's interesting. Through the years, when you think of the NFL and NBA, you think of the NBA as kind of the younger league. It's young kids. It's a lot of stars. I think that's a fair. I've been watching it for 40 years. NFL was, it's old. It's the Shield. It's corporate America. It's a little stodgy. The NBA was about player acquisition and free agency and shoes and stars and big personalities and unique games. And it's very interesting. The top 10 jersey sales for last year are in. NFL's top 10 jersey sales. 7 of the 10 are young kids. Mahomes, Lamar, Tua, Juju Smith-Schuster, Josh Jacobs, George Kittle, Josh Allen. They're like young. Brady's the old guy, and Russell and Aaron are middle-aged guys. But it's a bunch of stars. Most of them are very good on TikTok. I mean, George Kittle can be a pro wrestler. They're great on Instagram. And then you go to the NBA's top 10. Luka Doncic is the only one who's new and fresh. I'm not saying Giannis is old, but he's more in the Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson. It's LeBron, it's Curry, it's Durant, it's Anthony Davis, it's Dame, it's Kyrie, it's Westbrook. Great, I'm not saying they're great players. But it is funny if you said, who's got all the new, young, verbal stars, flash? It's actually the NFL. The NBA now is more the old vets, the old guys, the old heads, as they call them, the old heads. And it's just interesting. The NFL's done a nice job to make that March free agency. They'll never have the shoe deal of the NBA guys. But it is pretty interesting. The NFL's done a good job to let the players celebrate a little more, embrace their social media a little more. I think Roger Goodell gets beat up a lot. I get it, but I've been on this for years. I think he's a lot better than people think. He toes the line, but you don't hear him talking about Deshaun Watson. You see him supporting the players. NFL's done a good job. They have elevated a lot of these jersey sales now are kids. NFL's got all the kids. And with that, Nick Wright, co-host First Things First, is joining us live in New York City. All right, Deshaun Watson, generally, I think if you have a contract, you should play. But I said this morning, he's not going to get hurt if he sits out. He's not going to lose market value. He's not going to forget how to play. And the Texans, conversely, will be unwatchable. They could be 0-16. It'll hurt the equity. The owner will lose. Their merch sales will crash. I'm with him. Sit out. Get out of that cult. Your thoughts on it?
I'm 1,000% with him. And I do typically lean a little more pro player historically than you do. But I think everyone sees Deshaun has been nothing but a great teammate, a great pro, a great Texan. And he's been rewarded by the worst run franchise in the NFL that just finds new creative ways to implode. And I feel badly for Texans fans. I used to live in Houston. A lot of them are really, really good people. They didn't ask for this, but Jack Easterby seems to have gotten the ear of the relatively new owner, Cal McNair, the late Bob McNair's son, to a degree that it looks like they're going to pick Easterby over Watson, which is just a wild statement to make. But they decided that DeAndre Hopkins was worth a second-round pick and an overpaid running back. So this has been a poorly run franchise since its inception, Colin. It is amazing to think that 385 days ago, they were up 24-0 on the Kansas City Chiefs, and how far they have in the playoffs, and how far the franchise has fallen in just over a year.
So Tom Brady, this was pretty remarkable, has 7-8 bedrooms and 22,000 square feet. That wasn't enough. He needed complete isolation. His family's giving him 12 days off. He has not seen them for 6, and they won't be back until another 6. Has there ever been anybody this dedicated in your life?
Well, I mean, one could argue I'm talking to him because I feel like Tom is taken out of your playbook. If I'm not mistaken, about half of the football weekends a year, you tell your wife, go to one of our many other properties. I need this whole thing to myself. I talk to you almost every Sunday. I'm like, where's Ann? You're like, oh, no, she left. I had to drill down on these takes. But it is. Here's what I'll give Brady massive credit for. The guys who have done it incredibly long periods of time in other sports, near the end of their run, while I don't think their dedication wanes, they show some outside interest. Like even LeBron, he's still the best player in the world, but just being great at basketball isn't enough to satiate his appetite, right? So he's making movies, he's making television shows, he's getting involved in social justice. The guys we have seen play the longest, we have seen them start to dabble in other things. Brady doesn't. Brady's got the TB12 stuff, which is part of him playing so long, and does not seem to have any outside interests, which I think is what allows him to stay this dedicated and this sharp. And it's one of the most remarkable things about him, I think.
Listen, the Niners wanted Matt Stafford and the Rams wanted him. And we thought the Rams were trapped. But they had a healthy former number 1 pick who, by the way, has had some nice games in his career. And so we thought the Rams were trapped. But the Niners wanted him, and they couldn't get him because my question today is, what's Garoppolo's trade value? He's been slightly better than average, and he's always hurt. And so my takeaway is I always like Garoppolo. But I am wondering now in the last 4 years, he's missed 23 starts. You tell me, are the Niners trapped with him?
Yeah, they have the worst quarterback in the division now. And that's the worst. Whenever you do like a preseason prognostication, always ask yourself this. Does this team have the worst quarterback in the division? In which, if they do, they're drawing dead. If you looked at it this year, now retroactively, 7 of the 8 teams that had the worst quarterback in their division either finished last or second to last in that division. The only one that made the playoffs was the Bears, and they barely made the playoffs. In the playoffs, they were embarrassed, right? So Russell Wilson is obviously better than him. I would argue Kyler is better than him, and I think Stafford is at least potentially better than him. I like Stafford more, even though Stafford doesn't have the big game experience. Niner fans get hung up on, if you say you can't win a Super Bowl with him, they say we were in the Super Bowl with the lead. You could have won a Super Bowl with him, but that was the perfect storm. You still had Buckner. You had the greatest defense in the world. Saleh was still there. You had more weapons. The only way you can win a Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo is a time machine to replay that fourth quarter. And I think the Niners are smart enough. They don't want to make the same mistake. And he's not Blake Bortles. I'm not arguing he's Blake Bortles. But the Jags made a mistake. Can you make a Super Bowl with Blake Bortles? Well, we had a fourth quarter lead in the AFC Championship game with Blake Bortles, so why can't we? Because you can't. That was your one chance, and you didn't hit on it. You can't. So I understand why they would want to move off him. Finally,
player rent. You do these pyramid things. They're fascinating. Yeah. I'm into them. You go all in. I know the time you put into these things. And so Pro Football Focus and the Herd Football Focus, a new company, we believe...
Oh, second new company.
Yeah. We believe
big stuff.
The Chiefs have top 5 or 6 players outside of Brady, but it's all Chiefs. But both of us believe you get to about 7 on, and it's mostly Buccaneer players. Agree or disagree?
Yeah. No, I think that's right. But I think that once you're at the Super Bowl, I think depth is a touch overrated. And by that, I mean, you can argue that the way the Chiefs have built their team, being top heavy salary cap wise, having, a lot of stars and then a bunch of role players with not a big middle class is incredibly risky. because of the attrition of the season. But now you're in the Super Bowl. And obviously the big injury is no Eric Fisher. So Mike Rimmers moves to the left side. The last time Mike Rimmers played tackle in a Super Bowl, Von Miller had 2 strip sacks that flipped the game. So maybe that'll be the deciding factor. But I don't think it's a problem that the Bucs have, more depth of roster and more B and B plus players, because the Super Bowl should be determined by the A plus players. And there are 3 A plus players in this game, A triple plus, and they all play for the Chiefs. Mahomes, Hill, Kelsey. I think that'll determine it. And since you said that was the last one, I know we have to go. Congrats on everything this week, Colin, with the volume. I know how hard you've been working at it for a very long time. I'm so happy for you. Congratulations, man.
All right, thanks, buddy. I do agree with him there. I do think the 3 best players, A+. I think Brady's great, but in terms of athletically matchup problems, Tyreek Hill's the world's fastest football player. Travis Kelce is virtually uncoverable, and Mahomes is ridiculous. And I do think that. I go back to this on the Chiefs. I'm trying to talk myself into Brady winning, right? There's part of me thinking, okay. I can't get past this. The Buffalo Bills were on fire. And the Chiefs outscored them in that game at one point.